This call is now being recorded. This call is now being transcribed.
Awesome. We're together?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So last week we did a value chain analysis. We looked at the service industry, law firm to be specific, and I'd promised to share some templates that we can use to help us run value chain analysis and also competitor analysis. So the first thing you want to do is to properly understand your customer, understand who else you are competing against, and then also get some bit of understanding on the average industry prices, as well as other market dynamics. So that requires looking at everything from the inputs that go in production, the production processes, and how the different players are also position themselves. Yeah, that can also help you understand where you're going to set yourself up in the business environment. Are you going to do end-to-end, or are you going to pick one specific area and run with that? So probably the first best place to usually start when you're doing industry analysis is to look at the competition. Yeah, so people who are in the same product category or the same business domain, you look at their different product offerings that they have, and then now from there you're able to learn. So there's a number of different dimensions that I usually look at when doing competitor research and analysis. The first one is, what is the company? Yeah, so for the company, and here, because a company might have different products within the same category, feel free to include the same company as many times as possible. So as long as there's a product that you feel might be in competition with what you want to offer, you can have as many of them as possible. So let's say, for example, here we have Philips laptops. Yeah, so Philips laptops. Yeah, and then company category. So it's usually good to also get a sense of who this company is, and if you are to get into a competitive battle, like where would they actually sit? So here they can be a direct competitor. So that means they are selling the exact same products for the exact same customer segment and using similar methods as well. Yeah, so that's a direct competitor. An indirect competitor could be they are targeting the same customer, but they are potentially offering a slightly different solution to what you're offering. Yeah. So for example, let's say if we're taking laptops as an example, so they're business laptops, they're laptops that people can use for things like school, and then they're laptops that people can use for they're laptops for creatives. Yeah. So laptops for creatives, maybe high processing power, high storage, and then maybe things like fast, and then maybe also the screen needs to have like the right, it can be either an OLED screen or something like that, that helps designers and creatives get the best out of the work that they are doing. But sometimes that also cuts across, let's say, people like gamers and programmers. Yeah. So if Philip is just selling laptops, so let's say it's just business laptops, then a direct competitor would probably also be somebody who's selling just laptops for productivity. Yeah. But maybe you'll find that there's another player that, yes, they're selling laptops, but they've chosen to focus on the creative space. So these are kind of like very expensive machines, high processing power, and the other things that I've talked about. So they're just talking whether it's the HP Omens and the likes, customized machines, customized builds, and things like that. So yes, they are in the same category, but they are targeting slightly different demographics and also user intents within those areas. So that's how you can potentially differentiate who the competition is and where the opportunity is. And then location. So location, I usually try to group them in a number of different ways, depending on the size of your business. So it can be local within the same city. So if it's Nairobi, then these are the people that I'm competing with in Nairobi. If it's Mombasa and the likes, if they're present nationally, so that means they're targeting the whole of Kenya, then you can say, okay, this is a national competitor. Regional is within the same continent, or within the same, it could be East Africa, West Africa, and the likes, but at least we know that they're within the same continent. Because sometimes you find that a solution might not necessarily be viable in Kenya, but it might be viable in, let's say, Tanzania, Uganda, or maybe Nigeria. So it just depends with where you are as a business and the potential markets you're looking to expand into. You ensure that you lock that down. And then international is where now we're getting people from other continents who are coming to play here. So, for example, Uber. Uber is an international competitor to the likes of wanaitwaje, Safe Border, Little Cab, and the likes. Yeah. So you try to group them because it also helps you understand the size of competition, how much support they have. Do they have a longer runway to compete with you? Because there are a number of different factors that come into competition that might affect your competitive strategy. Um, that's something I think we can explore at a later time when we come to go to market. So we'll cover that. Estimated market share can be small, sizable, or large. And here, feel free to also, if you have like the exact figures, feel free to edit this and put your own. But usually, those three buckets can also help you focus on who you actually need to take care of. So, for example, somebody might have small market share in the beginning, but maybe they are not a small company. They have a huge backing. A good example is when Jumia came to Kenya. Yeah, they found other players. So they found Rupu. I think Kilimall had already set up at the time. There was Mokality as well. But because Jumia had a lot of financial backing, yeah, so their parent company, Rocket Internet, they had like a lot of budget. I remember when you'd browse a website, click kitu, another pop-up comes up, Jumia. Sometimes you find yourself in newsletters, you don't know how you got there. So like they were able to push and really push a lot of dollars in terms of like marketing spend, and that enabled them to actually get a sizable market share. So the reason why I was saying it's important to also gauge whether this person is local, regional, or international is because yes, they might currently have a small market share, but depending on their size of operations, they might present a challenge for you. So that's something that you consider. And then product and service category. Here, I didn't want to put any categorization because it's different across the board. So, for example, like in the law firm that we were looking at last week, we saw that yes, they are offering a different myriad of services, but they can choose to focus on, let's say, family law, commercial law, conveyance law, and all these other different things. So depending on what your competitors are also doing, it can be a bit easy to actually understand which area, where does the gap and opportunity lie, and where also the competitive force is very, very high as well. So essentially, you want to avoid places where competitive forces are very high, or if you enter in such a space, then you need to highly differentiate and distinct yourself in that market. So here, for example, in Philip's business could be maybe you're targeting office, maybe you're targeting students, maybe you're targeting programmers and creatives. Yeah. So if you're able to focus on a specific customer segment, then it means you're able, everything that you're doing as a business. So now when it comes to production or the delivery of the service, it's geared towards that customer and you're able to drive better value for them as opposed to just selling everything because you don't know what to focus on. Yeah. Decide in students, then also even in terms of like the marketing, where you're going to spend your time, it's going to be very different. So sometimes it's very good to find a niche and focus on that. Then the others can become more of like ancillary products. Ancillary inamaanisha, for example, kama unauza simu, you're also selling things like earphones and phone cases. Yeah. So we know that earphones and phone cases are probably, maybe they don't bring in the lion's share of the business. It's actually the phone. So same thing with you. If you are in the computer space, then try to see what is actually, how do you want to position yourself. So that's going to be important. And then product and service positioning can be cheap, budget, premium. So you remember that exercise we did where we looked at the scale in terms of like, if a product is cheap, how do customers behave and what are their perceptions in relation to that product? How about if it's priced in the middle, and if it's priced at premium? So we've already covered that so far. You also want to understand who your competitors are and how they're choosing to also position their products. Average pricing is important because it will also tell you the current market dynamics of the customer. Yeah. So what has the market taught them to expect when it comes to certain product categories? Yeah. Then you can, there are things that we can measure, which is what we'll cover also in today's session. And a customer segment, usually it's good to spread your risks. So they can be business to consumer, business to business. Sometimes it's business to consumer. So it just depends with what you have. Feel free to segment that as you will. And then if it's business to consumer, so you can be targeting babies, teenagers, adults, or the old population. So it just depends. If it's business to business, then you have your SMEs and proper corporates. Links can be links to either the company itself or the product pages. So feel free to link those as well. Monetization model is more around, especially this is more in the B2B space, in terms of like, how are these people actually making their money? Is it in long-term contracts? Is it payment upfront? Is it pay as you go? So try to understand all those different models because it will help when it comes to pricing. Yeah. So when you're going to go to market with your product, you also want to understand, you want to go with the best pricing strategy that can enable customers to actually consume your product. And then brand popularity. This is more around perceptions from the market. So if you were to ask anybody at random in the product category, so let's say, for example, if it's selling laptops, which brands do you know, or which companies do you know sell quality laptops in Kenya? So the brands that they'll mention, probably those are going to be kind of like your key competitors. So those are the guys who you need to actually either learn from or fight against. And then under unique selling proposition, so a customer evaluates products in a number of different ways. Yeah. So there are people who are very price sensitive. There are people who prefer quality. Availability can sometimes matter. And then choice, so being able to have lots of options. Utility, in terms of like, what is the service that I'm getting from this product. And then on the brand, these are more kind of like emotionally driven businesses. So yes, so you have this template. Feel free to make a copy and use it for your own research. So once you've captured everything, then now it's more around analyzing the data. So turn this into charts, meaning, so uone kama ni pricing, you want to see what's the lowest, what's the highest, what is the median price, yeah, and what is the average. So for example, if you're to charge in a maximum, then how much would you actually charge? If you're to charge like everybody else, then look at the median pricing and then try to see, okay, for me to make money now, how do I need to restructure my operations? What concessions do I need to make in terms of like my own value chain in order to be able to capture value? And then on the branding side, it's more around how do I build the same popularity, or what can I learn from what this guy is already doing to get the attention and the perceptions that they're already getting. Is this now clear? Are there any questions on how to use this? Is this useful?
It's clear, Mark. I have a
Mm.
question. Let's say, for
Mhm,
example, you work at a company and then your company offers a suite of solutions, let's say 10 solutions.
mhm, mhm,
But outside there, you have obviously I'll map out the companies that offer individual solutions or maybe three or four that are similar to the company, but also we have
mhm,
like individuals, like consultants also who are offering like one off of these solutions. So it could be, I don't know which example. So for example, if it's a digital transformation company, they're offering UX research and design, and then now you find there's a consultant who's offering UX research as a standalone, like they're a specialist. That's how they
mhm,
position themselves. So do you
mhm,
also map them here, or do you focus on brands only? Do you focus
mhm,
on brands as your main competitors, or do you also map all the because there's so many,
mhm. Yeah.
and then break them
So,
down by
mhm.
categories?
Yeah. So, for example, here, uh, instead of saying tertiary, maybe we can say substitute. Yeah. So, so to answer that question, so there are direct competitors, there are indirect competitors, and then there are substitutes. So, for example, maybe let's say for me to access your services, probably maybe for your case, maybe you haven't yet segmented. Yeah. But maybe you just have that one person who's offering UX research. So if this client could potentially just get that need sorted without coming to you, then that means yes, maybe they've not taken kind of like the whole digital transformation, but they've gotten a service which is within what they needed, and they're no longer willing to spend money with you. So definitely add them there. Another example, for example, when I was working at Moringa School, yeah, it's a 6-month program, yeah, and it's software development. But we know in software development there are very many different things. So there's the UX you've talked about, there's the cybersecurity, there's the API integrations, there's backend, there's front end, yeah. So somebody might potentially just want to learn cybersecurity without going through the whole hizo vitu za coding na nini hizo vitu zote. So in the event that Moringa School doesn't offer cybersecurity, but it is a unit within the software development track. And then maybe somebody else positions themselves as offering only cybersecurity. You see, it's still the same customer, still the same interests, but they have to make a decision on where they are going. Yeah. So it's very right. Always include them there, because now when you want to do your market analysis, let me see if I can go back kidogo. Yes, you remember this thing, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so where we talked about the total addressable market or total available market. So this is everybody. So we could have people who are looking for UX research, people who are looking for digital transformation, people who just need sales enablement, and people maybe who just need training. Yeah, so all of them are in that space. And then you get into your serviceable available market. So this in terms of like, okay, how many of them are actually digitally ready? Yeah. It could be in terms of like the tools they're using, the potentially the customer segments they're looking at, unaweka hapo ndani. Okay. And then now, how many actually just need, when it comes to, for example, like UX, that means potentially they are also in the business of offering UX services to other clients. So this is potentially maybe a business as opposed to an individual. So that number now starts to decrease. So you essentially find it's still the same people, but based on the different kind of interests they have, it reduces your market size. So it's always good to look at direct competitors, indirect competitors, and also substitutes. So those are the three areas. If you have them, definitely include them. I hope that
Okay.
answers the question. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. All right. And then under user segmentation, so just the same thing. So we're looking at demographics, psychographics, behavioral characteristics as well. Yeah. So age, it was a gender. I only have two. So kama kuna watu wa they, them, feel free to add there. Location also, where are they based? So are you targeting local customers within your city? Are you targeting the whole of Kenya? Is it a specific region, or are you going international as well? So same thing. Employed, so can be junior, senior, manager, executive, self-employed, unemployed. This is good because it potentially also lets you know who's making the decision when it comes to the purchase. Yeah. Persona category, consumer. So consumer is the person who's using the solution. Decision maker is the one who is giving the money, the person who's paying. So sometimes a decision maker can be a consumer. So for example, if you at the end of this session, if you want to go out to a restaurant and maybe get some chicken, then you're both the decision maker and the consumer. Influencer, so these are people who shape the opinions of the audience that you're targeting. So for example, if there's this lady, Catherine Kamau. Yeah, I think you guys are familiar with her. She was in Mother-in-Law, and she's a brand ambassador for, is it Nice and Lovely? So unapata, if some people see her using Nice and Lovely, then because they follow her, they'd be more inclined to do it. Size 8 was promoting soft care, and that also helped them to get some market share. So you also want to understand who the influencers are, because they can shape opinions and behaviors of the audiences that they've been able to capture. Gatekeepers, these are people, they don't necessarily make decisions, but they can affect your likelihood of success, because they control access to both. Sana sana, they control access to the decision maker. So a good example here could be, for us, like when we are growing up, you're just about to finish high school, and now you want to go into university education, and then you have to select a course. Yeah. So probably unapata, maybe there's an uncle of yours who is either can be a very successful lawyer, or a doctor or something like that. And maybe somebody like Peter, maybe you want to go and do education. So you might find, because your parents maybe potentially want for you to be as successful as this person, this uncle or auntie of yours, potentially maybe they would consider their opinion before they actually allow for you to go and do what you want to do. So you want to also ensure that you understand who the gatekeepers are. Another example could be you're selling a B2B solution. Yeah. So can be software as a service, can be an ERP, or it can be something that also helps the organization to manage their own internal processes. So yes, maybe the finance people and the HR people are the ones who are going to be using the tool. But you find that when it comes to budgets, yeah, so if it's going to be something that's going to be very expensive, then maybe somebody like a CFO would be a gatekeeper in this instance, because they know for them it's more around, is the business making sense? Are we keeping our costs low, and are we getting the maximum revenue that we can potentially get? So you also want to see which audiences you need to take into account. They're especially very important when it comes to the marketing element. And then initiator, so this is the person who notices that there's a problem and there's a potential solution. So this can be somebody who recommends a solution. So for example, let's say the HR department, we doesn't have a structured way of doing performance reviews and promotions. So maybe somebody can say, I'm aware of this consultant, I'm aware of this software technology that can help us better conduct objective performance reviews and things like that. So this is the person who notices that there is a potential solution. So categorize them. Pipeline stage. So this can be a cold lead, warm lead, hot lead. They're onboarding. They've already purchased. They're going into the service, after service, or they've left the organization. Usage intent. This is specific to your own domain. So what are they trying to achieve with the solution? And then under engagement, engagement can be active, passive, disengaged, and dormant. So an active client or customer is somebody who either they are using your application. So if it's an app, they actively come back every single day. If it's a subscription based service, then they actually have an active subscription. So they have paid and they continue to engage. If it's a content based business, then this means they are coming back, they're looking at your articles, they are opening your newsletters and things like that. Yeah. So active, this means this person is engaging with you at any given point in time. And engagement is also measured in terms of like time. Yeah. So for some businesses, depending on how often you communicate with this individual, let's say if you communicate with them every single day, then it might make sense to measure activity within a month. If it's, let's say, maybe you talk to this person once every month, then potentially you might want to measure engagement on a quarterly basis, because it means in a quarter, you've only talked to this person 3 times. Yeah. Welcome, Joy. And if you've only talked with this person 3 times, then that makes it much more easier to measure the engagement. So that's the active part. Passive is somebody who was once active, but they're no longer active. Yeah. So maybe potentially what they're doing is before, if it's an app, they used to open your app, they used to comment, they used to like, they used to share. But nowadays, what they just do is they open, they look at it, and then they leave. So they don't do any action that has business value to you. Another example could be, let's say, like for me, I was a Netflix subscriber. Yeah. Um, and then over time, I discovered that maybe potentially I don't have enough time to watch Netflix. So I know that Netflix is free on Android. So whenever I want to watch Netflix, maybe potentially just go and look at whatever I need to look at on my phone. So now I've moved from a person who used to actively engage and do certain actions that has business value to a person who occasionally just comes in, checks in, and then leaves. Yeah. Disengaged. So this is somebody who was active before, but they're no longer engaging. So they're no longer interacting with your business on all the different touch points. They're not making purchases. So it's sort of like they've gone dark. Yeah. So you also want to group them and understand at what point do they start becoming dark? At what point do they start disengaging? At what point do they become passive? A dormant person is a lead that you just acquired and they've never really taken any action. Yeah. So for example, if you are building a newsletter list and let's say you have 1,000, yeah, and out of the 1,000 lists that you have, whenever you send out communication, so let's say you've been sending out communications for almost a year. Yeah. So you have people who open, you have people who open and click, you have people who they used to open, they used to click, but they are no longer opening and clicking. And finally, you have people who have never opened. So for those people who have never opened, those are your dormant subscribers. Typically in a business, you don't want to waste your time spending energy and resources on people like that. So either you remove them or you find a way to ensure that they don't get into your pipeline in the first place. Seasonality. So this just depends with how you're looking at it. It could be seasonality, can be weather, but can also be patterns. So for example, if you are in the educational space, then you know in the educational space, businesses work with calendars. Yeah. So, and calendars affect intakes. So you might find maybe there's a September intake, there's a February intake, and things like that. So that means in those specific seasons, that's when you actually expect to get a lot of customer engagement and involvement. And do you want it to be like that, or do you want it to be different? Yeah. So you also understand where you need to test. Life cycle is more around the duration that the customer is actively engaging with the business, to the point at which they now fully drop off and maybe don't come back again. So you measure that. It helps you get a sense of the rate at which you need to get new business, and also the improvements you need to do to keep these people longer in the pipeline. Values, these are things that drive their decision making. Interests, in terms of like where they are, what are they interested in, what are they reading, where do they spend their time, things like that. Personality, so you can also define this for your own business. And then income. So this is just things that you can use to actually segment your user base, and then also have some bit of focus on with the marketing activities that you're doing. Joy, welcome. Do you want to tell us how you're doing and one highlight of the week? Joy? Ama umepotea? Okay, looks like she's left. All right. All right, cool. So any questions here before we get into today's session? Tuko pamoja ama nimewapoteza? Thanks Peter. Philip?
Tuko pamoja.
Sawa sawa. Cool. Joy, I can see you in the call. Do you want to say hi? Okay. Haya, tuendelee. All right. So we've already covered market sizing. Now we want to understand how to create long-term shareholder value. So we've looked a bit at how customers perceive value, how to create value. And at the end of the day, if you're a business, you also want to ensure that if you're making an investment, then you are definitely getting something in return. So here, we are going to answer primarily 2 or 3 questions. The first one is, should we actually spend time on this solution? Can we actually do it? And then what are the other related KPIs that can help us understand how we are doing in the furtherance of our mission and vision? So I have a quotation here where it's a value proposition looks outwards at the customers, the demand side of the business, because if you're going to get a customer, you have to make an offer for them. And the offer has to have some form of value so that this person can actually consider them. Yeah, can consider your solution. So that's a value proposition. A value chain focuses internally on operations. So we just talked about how to do a competitive benchmarking exercise, where you look at all the different things and how the different players have chosen to position themselves, so that you can also be better informed in terms of like what you're going to do to deliver your value. So are you going to play in the same space as them, or are you going to find a gap? And if you're going to find a gap, what are the activities that you're going to do to help you deliver that value? Yeah. And then strategy is integrative, because it brings the demand side and the supply sides together. So all the different actions in terms of like what you choose to focus on as a business will help you understand or will largely define the levels of success you'll have. Yeah. So we'll start with how to create long-term shareholder value. Mostly, unless you are an NGO, it's usually financial, and there are different ways that a business can generate revenue. Yeah. So you can choose to focus on a productivity strategy or a growth strategy. So when we say productivity strategy, there are two main things that sit under that. So there's number one, improved cost structure and increased asset utilization. So here, what do you understand by increased cost, improve cost structure? What can businesses do to actually improve their cost structures? Anybody to volunteer? You've probably seen these things in your own companies.
Let me give it a try. Improving cost structures. Let's say it's a B2B SaaS brand, and then they normally have this page on their website where they have like subscription packages. So improving
Mhm.
cost structures would be, I don't know, finding more ways on how the company could increase sales, increase sales by converting more or even improving the price points. I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's a good attempt. That would fall under the growth strategy. So we'll get into that. Uh-huh. So think of it this way: productivity strategy focus internally, growth strategy focuses externally. So internally, what can a business do to improve cost structures? The cost, and by cost structure, I mean the cost of doing business. Yes, so cutting costs for your raw materials. So this means you are negotiating with your suppliers for better deals. So, for example, if you are in the production, yeah, so let's say maize millers. So if you can get your maize for, let's say, 2,000 instead of 3,000 a bag, then you get it at that amount. So reducing that, in one way, you've reduced the cost of doing business, which means you've improved your cost structure. Yeah, because you've certainly started um, by lowering your costs. It means your margins are going to be much higher. Yeah, so even if you sell to the same customers, even if you don't increase the number of customers you have, it means a larger share of the revenue is going back to the shareholders as opposed to supporting operations. Another example could be, let's say you are an institution that deals in training. Yeah. So you could choose to either develop your own curriculum, or you can choose to outsource curriculum development. So if you notice that for you to develop your own curriculum, it takes, let's say, a lot of time to actually do it. Number two, you need to hire qualified learning and development professionals who can actually now develop that curriculum. So if you factor in the salary of the professionals you're using and the time factor, and equate it to a certain dollar or revenue amount, and then you compare that against just getting something that's already made available by people who also focus just on cost curation, then you compare and then you see maybe it might make sense to outsource, then you've improved your cost structure. So does that make sense now in terms of like how improving the cost structure affects productivity?
What about automation? So automating your, I don't know. Perfect. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. Automation also very wonderful. So and because it looks very differently. You just look into how do you want to go about it. So remember we talked about strategy. Yeah. So strategy, it's more around what are you choosing to do, and also what are you prioritizing. It's just a fancy word of saying getting the right prioritizations. So if you choose to automate, so maybe things like let's say getting leads, yeah. Initially, for you to get leads, probably you need to hire like a lot of salespeople, get them on ground, talking to people and whatnot. And then there's now the thing of sales follow up and whatnot, and it takes a lot of time. Maybe potentially even just calling these people, it means like there's a lot of money maybe you're spending either on a call center or getting credit and whatnot. And then maybe you say, okay, can we move this online? So if you move things online and you implement a tool for sales pipeline tracking, so something like either HubSpot or Salesforce or the likes, where you can now see, okay, this person is a lead, they're moving from a lead to onboarding, from onboarding they've made a purchase and whatnot and whatnot. So maybe potentially, instead of having a sales force of 50 people, maybe you're now able to do that just using two internal resources. So you've automated a process which has helped you become more efficient, and then now you are able to reduce your costs. So that thank you for that example. Uh-huh. Increased asset utilization. What do you understand by that? Somebody else to give it a crack. Joy, are you on the call? Joy is quiet today. Aye. Peter Philip. Aye. Sawa sawa. Aye. So I'll give an example here. Increased asset utilization. So there are some instances where your organization has provided you with the resources to use. So let's say things like feedback or learning and development. So we know within the HR department, there's usually a budget for learning and development, and they need to ensure that they've either provided the courses or they provided the facility for the staff to use those. But sometimes you find like in the day-to-day running of the business, maybe staff wanaona hatuna time ya kufanya hizi vitu, ama they don't prioritize it. And if they're not prioritizing it, that's something that's being paid for. Another example could be in the automation that you've talked about, Caroline. Yeah, I can come in, set up Salesforce, integrate our lead generation department, integrate our service departments, integrate our customer relations department and whatnot. Yeah. So if I'm paying a monthly subscription fee to utilize this tool. But let's say my customer service people, they are still calling people, but they're not actually coming back into the tool to record how the call has went, what are some of the learnings, and what are the next steps. So I find over time you are paying such a huge amount for a tool that people are not using. So for you to improve on productivity, because you know that these tools are not just implemented for fun, they are implemented to actually help the organization move forward. So the more people use them, the more you reduce the time that they spend on other areas that might not necessarily be generating business success. So by increasing the time they spend on the tools that you provided for them, it will eventually come back and affect the revenue in a positive way. So this is just ensuring that all the resources that you provided for your staff, they're actively using those resources. Another example here could be, let's say, you are on Canva. Yeah, I think we are marketers to some extent, and we have an understanding of what Canva is. So Canva is a web-based competitor to the Adobe Creative Suite, and maybe you just find that customers are only using one area. So maybe they're just creating banners. Yeah, but maybe you need for them to upgrade to the next year, where they can potentially now start using, maybe let's say, are there templates for videos that we can use? Are there things that we can use, let's say, for things like presentations and whatnot? So different small cues that you can give to the user to make them start using the other elements of the tool, so that you can also capture that in terms of revenue. Um, is it clear now how asset utilization can help productivity, which eventually drives shareholder value?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so and growth strategy. So growth strategy is more around increasing your revenue opportunities and enhancing customer value. So when we say increasing revenue opportunities, there are a number of different ways you can do it. So you can either increase your market share. So that means do more of marketing activities to be able to get a larger customer base. You can choose to develop the market. So this is in a place where the market doesn't exist, and you actually have to educate people about your solution so that you can now start getting people coming to you. You can choose to go into new geographies. If you've exhausted your current location, you can choose to look at different areas. And then now when it comes to the products and services you're selling, you can either choose to diversify the product portfolio. So that this means instead of just having one product, you have a number of different products and services, so that you can get a wider customer base. So when we say growth strategy, it focuses more on increasing market share and then also improving on your product or service portfolio. So. All right. So that's just kind of like the first customer perspective. The first shareholder perspective when it comes to finances. At the customer level, so you're unable to improve your costs, increase your asset utilization and revenue opportunities if you're not creating value for the customer. Yeah. Like we've already identified so far, customers make purchase decisions based on different value elements. Some people value price more than others. Some people value quality. Some people value availability, choice, functionality, and utility. The level of service that you're also getting, that could also be a factor. And then partnership. So as you are focusing on your cost structure, as you're focusing on improving your revenue opportunities, you want to see what customer metric am I going to improve on, or am I going to focus on creating the value so that it will help me. So for example, if I'm going to cut down on my cost structure, so let's say, for example, instead of having three people who are doing sales calls or who are doing customer service calls, I only want to have one. Yeah. But maybe your customer, they prefer service. Yeah. And they prefer availability as the key most value elements that make sense, and part of the reason why they bought from you in the first place. So in the event that this customer wants to reach out to customer service, and then they go to your pages and then you send them to a bot, they call and then it is put in, they find an answering machine, and now they have to wait in a queue for, like, let's say 10-15 minutes. So on one end, yes, you have improved your cost structure and also potentially improved on your asset utilization, but you've created the wrong value for your customer. So there's a very high likelihood that this customer might actually fall off from your brand. So you want to ensure, yes, whatever strategy you decide to do, whether it's a productivity strategy or a growth strategy, it is actually targeting the right value elements for your customer based on the reasons why they joined your business in the first place. Does that make sense?
Oh, I didn't get
We are
that.
we are discussing heavy stuff today.
Yeah.
Acha nitoe jacket. Haya, sawa sawa. So tumeongea vitu kadhaa, tumeongea growth strategy na productivity strategy, si ndio?
Mhm.
Haya, and we know, for example, what was the last thing you bought, Caroline?
No, I
You can
think
remember.
for me, you left me at customers use different value elements.
Sawa sawa. So the question is, yeah, what was the
Mhm.
last thing you bought? What was the last? If you can remember, what was the last thing you bought?
Oh, what I bought? What I bought?
Mm.
What? A
Mhm.
perfume. There's a perfume.
There's a perfume you bought.
Yes, yes. Michael's
So,
bouquet or something.
so
Mhm.
what was going through your mind when you're thinking about buying that perfume?
For me, I was thinking about how will it make me feel. That's the main reason why I buy perfumes. How will the perfume elevate my mood?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How, and
How will it
what
make
goes
me
in?
feel?
So
And also
how
the
will it
price
make?
point. Yes, that's the first thing I asked them. No, actually, that's the
Mm-hmm.
second thing I asked them. The first thing
Mm-hmm.
I asked them to share with me the scent profiles they have, and then the second
Mm-hmm.
was how much. What are the costs for each?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, sasa. So perfume, I know maybe there are different things. So there's the scent profile which you've talked about, yeah. So is it more floral? Is it more sweet? Is it citrusy?
Mhm.
So kuna hizo. Is it an wood? Is it a leather? So
Mhm.
there's those kind of like the scent profile, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably there's something like projection. So how far can
Yeah.
somebody smell me? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's
The
the
sillage. How much of
exactly.
the scent are you leaving behind for other people to smell?
Ndio hiyo.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then maybe something like longevity, yeah. So will I smell good for 5 minutes and then harufu ishe,
Niche. Mm.
ama is it something that can last me the whole day? So
Yeah.
probably uliangalia vitu kama hizo,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And then you also looked at price,
Yes.
yeah. So what I'm saying is,
Mm.
if a product manager, so let's say the person who's um, responsible for developing the perfume, yeah,
Mhm.
and the marketer. So a product manager and a marketer. So right here, this course was centered around improving our product and marketing sense. Yeah,
Mhm.
cultivating that sense. But we know that these people are employed. So for you as a product marketing consultant, somebody brings you up, into the company
Mm.
to increase their value, their shareholder value. So that means either more sales, ama more profit margins, yeah.
Mhm.
Tuko pamoja mpaka hapo?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Haya, sawa sawa. So now as a product manager, you can choose to do a number of different things. So you can choose to reduce the cost structure, or you can choose to increase the market size, yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so when you say productivity strategy and growth strategy, that's what we mean. Under productivity strategy, you are reducing the costs and you're improving efficiency.
Okay.
On the growth strategy, you are increasing the market size, and that means more sales.
Okay.
Tuko pamoja mpaka hapo?
Yes. Yes.
Now let's come to your example of the perfume. For you as a customer, price is a consideration. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then function. So you've talked about improving your mood. Yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe this means potentially it's a perfume that you're wearing for you. You're not really wearing for maybe to get inaitwaje,
Compliments.
comments. Maybe you're not wearing maybe to go out, let's say on a dinner or something like that.
Mhm.
But it could be maybe something like over a daily driver for you. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that means the functionality that you want from this perfume, it's something that can elevate your mood.
It's
So
intrinsic.
now, exactly. So now potentially you might find that based na kutengeneza perfume, we know there are a number of different ingredients that go into that. Yeah. So there's the maybe the extracting the inaitwaje, the essence from different materials. So whether it's flowers, whether it's fruits or whatever it is, like there's that process of extraction, and then now there's the formulation in terms of like now they are coming to curate it, and then also the materials they use. So it could be oil. So kuna zingine ziko na oil, the ones that have more oil ziko na more projection, longer.
Extracts. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. But that means the more oil you use, the more expensive the
The
perfume
perfume.
becomes.
Yeah.
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 So now here I am as a product manager. I want to improve my cost structure. Yeah. And then naona, okay, maybe instead of using 60% oil, can I reduce this to 40% oil? Yeah. And by reducing to 40% oil, potentially ndaekuwa nimelower costs. Yeah. But as I'm lowering the oil, I'm affecting something in terms of like what the customer value. So if the customer's value is around, I want this perfume to last me the whole day. Yeah. I know I have reduced the longevity of the perfume by 20% or whatever percentage it is. So that means, yes, I have created value for the shareholder, but I have reduced the value that I'm creating to the customer because I did not target the right thing for them. So what I want to do is to understand who my customer is and understand how do they make decisions. What are the core considerations? So, for example, if price was the consideration, then I know if let's say price was the biggest consideration, and I reduce using the oil from let's say 60 to 20%, and then that potentially reduces the cost of the perfume, let's say from 15,000 to 12,000, then I have created the right value for my customer because they make price-based decisions. Yeah. So that means this customer is most likely going to buy from me, even if the perfume will only last, let's say, up until 4 p.m. If they sprayed it at 8 in the morning, then I've created the right value for them. However, if my customer was coming to me for, I need a perfume that can last me the whole day, and I actually reduce the inaitwaje, I reduce the oil that I use, which means now this perfume is not going to last me the whole day. Fine, I have still reduced the cost structure of my business, but I've done it by creating the wrong value for customers, and this means I might potentially lose out on this customer. What I could have done essentially would be maybe maintain the same inaitwaje, the same level of oil I use in my perfumes, but maybe potentially in the sense that I'm using, maybe I could exclude one ingredient. Kwa sababu whenever you spray a perfume, kuna the base notes, and then the longer you wear it, as inapigwa na upepo, some other scents start projecting. So maybe you could emit one of them and reduce. But because it will still last me the whole day, I have my thing sorted. So does that make sense now?
Yeah. 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 That makes sense.
Mhm. Anybody else has a question on this area?
I'm good.
Mko sawa? Aya, sawa sawa. So essentially what I wanted to highlight with this section is that you always need to make decisions for your customers. That is why you cannot target everybody. Yeah, because it becomes very difficult to offer the same level of service for the different customers. So once you've chosen your customer, are they a cheap customer? Are they a middle customer? Or are they a customer who is willing to pay for more? If they're a customer who's willing to pay for more, then the value you will create will look very differently. So for example, let's say somebody who is very interested in brands. Yeah. So we know that the primary brands, so you'll have your Versace's, your Christian Dior's, what else? What else? Which one else do we know? What perfume?
Amouage, there's some
Ehe, yes. So
DNG.
that
Yeah.
bas
Yeah.
DNG hizo zote. So kuna watu wana prefer brand, yeah, and for them you can see that price is not the consideration, yeah, and it might potentially even not be, for example, even the smell and the nini, but ile hata Nyashinski sasa ile koloni ya Versace, unaona it's like it's I know I am wearing a brand name. So for people who are wearing brand names, then you find like you create more value in that space. So potentially you might find even it's not that the product is of a very high quality, it's just like how it's marketed. Yeah. So there you find that maybe you create more value by let's say the influencer partnerships, where you choose to actually retail your perfumes. So for example, kama perfumes zako zinapatikana tu kwa airports, zinapatikana tu kwa five-star hotels and such like, then mtu anajua this is exclusive stuff, so you've created the right value for them. However, tunajua kuna other niche brands, yeah, and tunajua there are also other imitators where somebody will actually get the same scent profile and they go and make a generic, yeah. So akitengeneza generic, potentially you might even find that the generic one has better projection, better longevity, but maybe inaitwa rasasi ama kitu kaa hiyo, yeah.
We normally call them
So
dupes. They're called dupes.
the, yes, the dupes, yeah. So you can find a dupe that is very close to hii ingine, but because they're not spending a lot of money in it aje marketing costs and whatever, they'll give you the same scent profile at a lower price. So which customer are you targeting and what matters for them? Because once you understand this, then your productivity strategy and growth strategy will look very different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, yes, yes.
Philip, umenyamaza sana. Tuko pamoja?
Ya, tuko pamoja.
Aya, safi. Cool. The next thing we are looking at now is the process. So the things that you're doing to help you create the right customer value. So you can choose to look at your operations, so supply. So far we've talked about where do you source your materials? Is it oil? Is it more paraffin? Is it nini? Hizo vitu zote. Distribution, do you want to do marketing and delivery? So if your customer cares more around service, then it means you need to partner with distribution partners that are a bit more professional in terms of like how they engage. See nini, mtu wa ndudhi anakupigia simu, uko wapi? Imeonyesha how much hapo kwa hiyo app yako, yeah. So if you know that your customers care more around the brand and the service and the quality, then it means even the partners that you're going to engage to deliver that value to them are going to look slightly different, yeah. Customer management. So how do you acquire customers? How do you satisfy and retain them? Innovative processes. So this is R&D. So in the example that we shared around where to create value, that is essentially research and development. Yeah. So what matters more? Is it the scent profile? Is it the longevity? Is it the projection? So nikisimama hapa sahi, can somebody who's 5 meters away, can they smell it? Or is it that maybe I prefer intimate scents where you can only get the scent when either unani hug ama when you're seated close to me? So R&D is that process where now you want to see, if you decide you're going to diversify your product portfolio, maybe you want to target people who prefer perfumes that project, and maybe people who prefer intimate scents. And then now you divide, you try to see what are the different mix of activities and inputs that I'm going to use to be able to deliver that thing. Regulatory and social, very important because some industries are heavily regulated, especially industries that have public participation. So, for example, education, the finance industry, employment, what else? Even the environment itself. So it just depends with which industry you are in, and then trying to see what are the laws that govern, even for example something like the food categories. Hapo tunajua kuna Ministry of Health, poisons and whatever board, they have some certifications that you need to actually undertake. And then the learning perspective is now, what are you learning in the business that can help you generate the right data to be able to optimize over time. So hii ni kama masters hapa ni ile tusemeaje, it's like a by the way in this section of the course, but it's very important, especially as you continue to grow in your career. You'll find that you'll need to have this view of the business. Yeah. So under shareholders, you understand what matters to them, because now is it more money, is it profitability, and all these other different things, so that you can know how to create that value for them. Yeah. So for example, Caroline, you've talked about these people. We have a new manager, and this new manager, they're saying we need a totally new different marketing strategy. Do we understand actually what's behind that decision making? Yeah. And then now from there, we are able to see, okay, with our existing marketing plan, is it able to achieve the goal that she wants? If it can't achieve the goal that she wants, then maybe that might make sense for us to reconsider. But if it can, then we need to bring her to the table and try to understand how do we actually convince her. So this is more of like hii ni part ya management na decision making in terms of like the areas of focus in a business. Any questions here before I proceed? Tuko behind kidogo. Tuko sawa? Tuendelee?
Yeah, we're good, you're good. And I love the breakdown you've given me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Haya. Na watu muongee, by the way. Msipoongea Caroline pekee ndiye atabenefit hapa. So I want questions, yeah? Because when you ask me questions, it also pia mimi inanisaidia. Yeah? So ask questions. So back to product and marketing, yeah? So whenever you want to validate your product ideas, there's a couple of principles that you need to take into account. Number one, don't rely on the loudest voice in the room, kwa sababu we all bring our different biases in any engagement. So for example, even the lady that you talked about, you've said she already has that loud voice. Yeah. So there's a bias that she's bringing into the process. Yeah. As a good leader, as a good employee, you need to challenge things. So don't always rely on the person who's loudest in the room. They might be loud, yes, but maybe potentially they may not have the best ideas. Number two, don't start with the data you have to see what questions you can answer. So 2020, yeah, every business had its own set way of doing things. And then in March, COVID happened. Yeah. And when COVID happened, especially, and this is a real example. So for example, like for us, at that time, I think I was still working at Moringa. We'd already settled on the goals for the year. Yeah. Tukasema the business is going to grow by X%, and these are the activities we're going to do to help us get there. Yeah. Little did we know that the environment would change. And now that because the environment has changed, so there's lockdowns, people are afraid. So some companies are saying they're firing their employees because either business is going to be low, people are not spending as much as they used to, and then schools have been closed. So in times of chaos, kuna ile Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. So in times of chaos, you find like the human, the average human, ama the binadamu wa kawaida, they go back to their normal instincts, which is survival. So survival inamaanisha nini? Don't spend uncontrolled, like don't spend just anyhowly. Try to be safe, so don't interact with a lot of people, don't go out and all these other things. But here we are as an organization where all our model is based on people being in class, X number of students and such. So sometimes you find like people are not really willing to spend money. So if we are just using the data that we had previously to make projections, then there might be some threats or some areas that we have overlooked that might affect our success as a business. So essentially, you want to look at trends, because trends are important. They show you potentially how things are going. And then also the environmental and situational analysis. So things like politics, kuna maandamano, how does it affect purchase decisions? Legal, yeah. So there's a data protection law that is coming up. How does that affect how businesses do business and retain customer information? What are they allowed to share? What are they allowed to store? A couple of weeks back, you saw the thing to do with the WorldCoin, yeah. So if you are WorldCoin and you're going to launch in Kenya, probably there are some things you would have already needed to help you understand if there are gray areas, where can you play in those gray areas? But if there are things that you must absolutely adhere to, then what are those rules? So can you actually curate your products around that? How do you get the necessary approvals to get there? So don't just look at the information you have where, can the product work? Yes. Do people want money? Yes. Will they allow for us to scan their biometrics? Yes. So if that is the only data you're using, then it can affect your business over time. So don't start with those two. Try to see the questions that you need to answer. Is there anything else that might prevent me from making money? Is there anything that might make customers say no to my product? Will I potentially get into trouble with the regulators? If a competitor was to start doing what I'm currently doing, will my value still be enough for me to retain my customers or not? So ask yourself these questions and then go and find that data. Yeah. Only work on features that matter and deliver results and have real impact. So in the examples we talked about, Caroline, there's people make decisions based on service, brand, availability, choice, and all these other things. So whenever you want to see what areas you're going to focus on, you need to really understand who your customer is and what drives their core decision making. Yeah. So is it price? If it's price based, then you need to ensure that whatever value or whatever product variations you're coming with, price is the key thing you need to optimize for. And then experiments. So like in the example, we're also saying you can choose to what's it called? You can choose to play around with the different variations of the same product. So, for example, when COVID happened, also some restaurants had to cut back on their menu. I'm a big fan of Java. I used to enjoy their burritos. So they had kulikuwa na burrito, and the burrito had chicken, ilikuwa imerapiwa, it had Mexican beans, and then kulikuwa na rice. So for the price of 900, like this was a meal that you could eat 2 times before you actually finish. Yeah. But when COVID happened, they started to reduce. So unapata maybe tomorrow it won't come with rice, it will just come with beans. After a month, wakatoa beans. So it's now just the burrito itself. And then after that, maybe they removed it altogether. So you make like small changes to see how does it affect customer satisfaction and retention. Yeah. Another example is Netflix. Yeah. Every year or every 2 years or so, they'll try to increase their prices slowly. But as they're increasing their prices, maybe they are doing more production, marketing more relevant courses. They're telling you these are the top 10 programs that people are watching in Kenya. So okay, for an extra increase of 100 or 200 shillings, if I don't have to make a decision on what I'm watching, where I can just see what's trending and I go into that, then it potentially still makes sense to utilize this tool. Ama, if I don't have to go on sketchy streaming sites and dealing with 10, 50 pop-up banners and advertisements, I prefer just to get to a place where I know there are no ads and all these other things. Then this can stick. So when it comes to validating your ideas, this should be some of like the guiding principles you can use to help you make better decisions on which areas you should focus on, whether as a marketer, as a product marketing manager, or even as a business executive. Yeah. So how does that play into what we're doing? Yeah. So when it comes to product ideas, you want to look at 3 dimensions. So the first one is viability. Viability answers the question, should we do this? And how you do that is through the right market sizing and the revenue potential. So I think it was last week, but one, we did market sizing where we saw you look at the total number of people that could potentially be a good fit for your product. And then also, if they were to spend to you, you can either calculate that by per capita spending, or you can sometimes even choose to look at the price of your products and then multiply by that. And that gives you the biggest share. Yeah. So that's one thing. But we know it's not only about the amount of money that people can spend. There are also things like competitors, and what is the market share that do each of these competitors have. That can also let you know how much you actually have to play with. So for example, in the sheet that I was that we started looking at today, we saw that there's a big competitor, there's a small competitor, there's maybe somebody who's in the middle. If the biggest competitor in the market already has 90% of the market, yeah, that means the revenue potential might not essentially be that big for you. Yeah. So to some extent, if you're able to analyze that, then it will tell you whether your solution is viable or not. The other thing is situational analysis. By situational analysis, you do an assessment of the current environment. How are the laws changing? How is technology changing? When it comes to what's it called, the political environment, how does it affect how much money can be made in that specific customer segment, and then the industry itself. Any question on viability? All right. The next thing is desirability. So you want to know, do people actually want the solution that I'm coming up with? Yeah. And how you do this is through customer segmentation, and also learning more about those customers. So yeah, I might be using terms that maybe we're not familiar with. Philip, what is segmentation?
Okay, from my understanding is grouping the customer or the market into specific, depending on specific characteristics or their needs, specific needs or wants based on the product that you are providing to them.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, so segmentation is you look at your customers and then you try to identify common trends. So, for example, if it's all men living in Westlands between the ages of 18 and 27, yeah, so you can actually find that segment of men and say this is who I am targeting. Yeah, so that is segmentation. So common features, common characteristics, you put them in one bucket. Personalization. Peter, what is personalization? Do you want to Google? Peter? Joy, are you able to talk now?
Hello, morning, Mark. So
Morning.
sorry, I've had a hectic morning. I
Yeah.
cannot say I have followed through, but the question is, what is personalization?
Yes.
Top of my mind, it is trying to contextualize something to fit a particular person's desire, I guess.
And we can see who is the lawyer in the Nini. Vocabulary is very healthy.
No,
Eh?
no, Daniel, though, stop it.
She's even explained it better than I could have. Yeah. So segmentation focuses on the group. Yeah, because it's people who have similar characteristics. Yeah. Personalization focuses on the individual and their specific needs. So, for example, like for me, yeah, as a consultant, I know there might be businesses that maybe need my support, but because in terms of like how I've organized my day, I prefer number one, you book a discovery meeting with me before the first call, and then that meeting has to be virtual. And then now from there, we can actually gauge whether there's good understanding and good vibes between us. Yeah. So that we can now kick off before we start saying, let's meet physically and all those other things. Another thing, I don't prefer to take calls before actually having scheduled the meeting, because sometimes maybe a phone will ring, somebody calls you, and they already want to start telling you all their problems, and they don't know if maybe you're preparing for another meeting and such like and such like. So if I was to reach out to customers, I probably try to also understand these customers who actually value my time. Yeah. um do they maybe, okay, I'll answer the call. Okay, do you have 5 minutes? Okay, I wanted to talk to you about this. Can you actually find a time that works for us? And then nasema sawa. But mtu akitaka, yani anataka tu insist, then I probably know this is somebody who will want to control my time, and we're going to run into issues in the future. So that is personalization. And how you understand those things, you can do price testing, journey maps, focus groups, and all these other things to understand whether the solution you have is going to be desirable. We'll get into that as we continue. The final piece is feasibility, and feasibility answers the question, can we actually do this? Do we have the capacity to do it? And what you look at to be able to understand that is, number one, the time and cost. So you want to come up with the product solution. At what time do you want? By what duration between creation, between the fact finding, developing your concepts, going into production, and getting it to market? How much time do you actually have? So you look at that as the first thing. Number two, if you are to do it yourself, or if you are to outsource and all these other things, what does that mean from a cost perspective? Do you actually have the right funds to be able to deliver that value? Have you saved up? Do you have the budgets approved from either your manager or the CEO, and such like and such like? So, for example, for Joy's case, you'd mentioned that you mentioned something to do with case development, and there was also something else. Those things that you need to have. Can you remind
The
us?
resources?
Yes.
Okay, so we need the development and tracking system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the other resources we needed are, let me see, um, oh yeah, the platforms, the resource platforms, the international
Mm-hmm.
ones, yeah.
Exactly. So in order to be able to properly litigate, you know that you need to invest in those areas. Yeah. So in terms of like can you actually afford doing that? And if you cannot afford it, are there other ways in which you can ensure that you're still able to get the same? So is it that maybe you partner with another law firm, and then maybe you share the costs? So things like that. Capacity and tools. So this means the expertise of the team you have on board, and also the materials they're using. Yeah. So if you're in the software space, and maybe you want to win big contracts, then that means you need very skilled software developers. Yeah. And by software developers, that also affects the cost. Yeah, because if you're using a senior developer who's maybe 7 years into programming versus a junior developer who has just graduated, potentially the outcome is going to be very different. So that can also help you understand, do I actually want, can I do this? Do I have the capacity to be able to do this? And then the business model is more around how you're making money. Yeah. So is it locking clients down on long-term contracts? Is it buy now, pay later? Is it pay as you go? Is it what's it called? Like a like for like, in exchange of you get this service, you pay right away, and things like that. That is important because it affects cash flow, and if it affects cash flow, then it also means your organization needs to be structured slightly differently depending on the choices you're making. So how you know you have the right validation for your products and the activities you're going to do to deliver that value is if you have a sizable market share that makes financial sense, and the solution is something that the customer actually wants. And then internally, you have the team that is able to deliver on that. Or even if you don't have the team that's able to deliver on that, you can find a partner that can help you deliver the same value. Then you have the right mix of variables that can ensure that your product becomes successful. Any question on this part? Na kama ninawapoteza, feel free kusema nawapoteza. Yeah.
No, this is clear. The breakdown is good, yeah.
Sawa. So there are a number of different tools we can use to test desirability, viability, and what's the other one? Feasibility. The first thing is focus groups. So focus groups are usually important before you launch something. Yeah. So it's better to have them before you launch something, just so that you can get the qualitative feedback or information that might potentially affect the success of your products. So it measures desirability, and it can help you track customer needs, their motivations, their aspirations, and pain points. The reason why we are saying the average accuracy for focus groups is around 10% is because of how they are executed. So I'm pretty sure, especially in politics, we've seen a lot of opinion polls, yeah. So especially during the election period where you hear candidate A, there's a 90% approval rate in any case, and some of those polls you sometimes disagree with them. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes. So a key thing of focus groups is, number one, the context in how they're done, who they were targeted to, and also the kind of questions that were asked. That can also influence whether you're going to arrive to the right conclusions or not. In order to improve the correctness of your focus groups, the first thing you need to do is do a lot of screening. And by screening means, before you actually now start running the focus groups, do you have a way to filter out who to include in the focus groups and who not to include in the focus groups? So you start by your customer segments, yeah? Ensure that you have the right profiles of people that you want to interview. So that's number one. Number two, you try to also prevent an area where, in any group, there are people who talk a lot, there are people who don't talk a lot. So there are introverts, there are extroverts, and then there are also people who are very expressive. Some people are not very expressive. Yeah. So you find that if you put somebody who's very expressive with somebody who's not very expressive in a place where you're going to ask questions, and this person is just the only one who's talking in the group, they might influence what these other people are going to say, or you might not necessarily get the right contributions. So could potentially be better to have people who are comfortable talking, put them together, people who potentially take a bit of time to open up, put them together. And even when it comes to the different genders, sometimes you might find that having men and women in the same focus groups might influence the results you're going to get. So potentially sometimes you might want to separate. And even within genders, you might find that the results that you get might still be different if you don't do the right screening. So for example, if you are to have a 40-year-old lady, a 30-year-old lady, and an 18-year-old lady, and maybe you want to develop a product, and you have them in the room, and you're asking them questions, whether it's on their needs, motivations, and aspirations. These are three very different people with very different contexts, and in as much as maybe they might get some usage from your product or service, their perceptions are totally different. So if you have all of them in the same space, then that will affect the efficiency and correctedness of your focus groups. And then finally, people lie. Yeah. So essentially, my recommendation here is you need to run, don't just go from one focus group session. Try to do a minimum of 6 to 10, 12 or thereabout. Because once you've done that number, then some common themes will start coming up, and then you'll start see, okay, now this is the truth in terms of like what people are saying, because common patterns will start showing up. But if you just run one focus group, you might really waste the monies that you're spending. And then for each focus group, try to have at least 4 to 8 people. Yeah, 4 to 8 people, because you need to manage that time, and you need to manage those people very, very, very well, so that at least everybody gets a chance to say something. But then also you don't have too few people whereby you're just basing your results from one person who's talking in the room. Make sense?
Yeah.
Haya, sawa sawa sawa. Next time tutasema kila mtu unmute, tujue, nataka kujua mnafanya nini kwa background.
Ama the top participant apatiwe gift.
By the way, tutaona hivyo. The top participant, we
Kila
shall
mtu
see.
participate, yeah.
Ndio kila mtu participate, by the way. Yeah. Haya. Events and outreach. So you can do a live event to gauge customer interest. It also measures desirability. And how you track is, are people actually going to sign up to come and hear about what I want to talk about, or to come and learn more about the product or service? Yeah. So you look at registrations, how many people actually signed up, how many of them attended, and then also the revenue. So if, for example, if it's a paid event, how many people actually forked out their money to come for this thing? So even for me, I'm not afraid to share some of my tactics. This masterclass is also a way for me to measure in terms of like, is this something that people actually need? Is there a need for it? Yeah. So I look at how many people actually signed up versus how many more people actually paid, and we get into that, and then I refine as I go. Yeah. So events are a good way for you to understand that. Crowdsourcing. So this is a good way to fundraise and collect pre-orders before development. So essentially, if you are developing, this is sana sana kwa the technology space, yeah, where a new technology is coming up, you're coming up with a new invention. So let's say, for example, like in your case, Caroline, kuna hiyo glove ya kuoga, yeah. So assuming I wanted to come up with it, and I can share the concept. So I'm thinking of coming up with a new glove that maybe hii sasa iko na electricity. So instead of kusongesha ama let me go back. Nini? Toothbrush, the electric toothbrush, yeah. So maybe the first person that came up with the concept of electric toothbrush came up with the idea, akasema okay, it will be battery operated, and this is potentially better than using your own hands, because the circular motion inaingia kwa kila mahali nini nini vitu kaa hizo. So I've talked to a doctor, daktari ameniambia this thing might maybe prevent cavities by up to maybe let's say 30% compared to normal brush. And the beauty of it is that instead of throwing it away, you just replace the head. So I need 3 million to make the first 100,000 copies. People who sign up, you'll get the first come, first serve. So they go to a website like Kickstarter, they go to a website like Indiegogo, they put all the description, the concept that they want to use, and then you get an early bird price. So for crowdsourcing, you find like if the recommended retail price is going to be like 3,000, you say for the people who participate in the first round of crowdsourcing, you guys will get it at 1,500, and then you put a target. So it's a good way for you to actually see how many people are going to take interest in your ideas. How many items are you actually going to sell based on terms of like the investment that they make, and then also when it comes to conversions. So once you've done the prototyping and delivered to them, are they actually using this thing? So the accuracy there is quite high, because you are able to get people who are willing to pay for a product before they actually even see it. Yeah. So that is also another way to validate your ideas. And then user reviews. So dive into frustrations or praises of your own products or competing products and services. So essentially how you can do this, you can go, let me see, which is a popular brand that we can look at? Give me an example.
Coca-Cola? No.
Coke nini. So let's say tuone kama let's tuangalie nini ka Radisson Blue.
Okay.
So under Radisson Blue, ngoja. Okay, so you can use either unaweza tumia websites kama TripAdvisor kidogo tu. I was trying to see wapi nani anaweza kuwa akona Google reviews. Let me see. Aya, sawa. So you go to Radisson Blue and then unaingia kwa ile. You get into what's it called? You get into the reviews itself. So you want to understand. There's some keywords that you see in terms of like out of the 1,900 people that have left a review for Radisson Blue, they're saying it's good for business. The ambience is okay. The business lounge is popping. The environment seems quite good. Security. So here you start to understand, for example, if I was to get into this space where I am charging 28,000 per night, then I know that these people probably are business people. Yeah. So I need to have a business lounge. Security is very important to them. Environment. So maybe if I'm in business, I need to be in an environment that allows for me. I can't just be in a place where I can hear all the matatus passing by. I can hear all the nightclubs and whatnot. Yeah. What else? Services need to be good. Meetings. So meeting na business, known as they go well together. Workshop. So this still shows you. So Radisson probably above everything else, what I can see here is it is good for business. Yeah. So now I want to understand, because these are the key things that my customers value. So I do, and this is part of now the competitor analysis which you're talking about in the beginning. Now you go into Radisson, go into their website, look at their rooms, potentially just visit yourself and see how they conduct themselves. Another thing you can also look at, unaingia huku ndani, unaangalia, you sample. You don't necessarily need to look at all the feedback, but you can sample and see what are people saying. Yeah. And essentially what you also want to do You also want to look at easy. Yeah. So you also want to look at the negative experiences, because we are looking at people's needs, motivations, and pain points. So you want to see, out of the good feedback that Radisson is getting, what need are they not fulfilling? So unaangalia no breakfast table for a team of 11. So you can already see, if you have a large team, you might struggle. Yeah. What else? Hotel could be great if management were removed. I don't know what that's about, but maybe even internally, in terms of like internal processes. Uh, I experienced racism and colorism, profiling. As a Kenyan, that's something that maybe you don't need. So when it comes to training your staff, for your product, you need to call it out very specifically. So if there are Kenyans who are concerned about being mistreated because maybe the color of their skin, then that needs to be a value add that you talk about very clearly. Client nini resolution of client complaints. Yeah. So their phone, in terms of like how they were handled, things like password nini. So bado hapo inaonyesha ni training. So in the service industry, you can see some of the things that are very important. So that's how you do customer research using reviews. You can do the same thing with Google reviews. Just pick the key competitors, go into the highest rated comments, lowest rated comments, find the common themes that keep coming up. And then that will also give you ideas of, for people who go to hotels, for people who buy a certain type of product, for people who shop online, these are the key areas where they derive value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I have a question. How
Mhm.
much trust can you base in the reviews? Because I know a tactic where competitors go to the competing businesses and write those comments.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very good question. Very good question. And this is why, for data, you don't just rely on one data source. Yeah. This is why, for example, something like a user review and a focus group might make sense. So you combine different data sources and try to see, are you going to arrive at the same conclusions? And if they're going to be different, probably the deviation shouldn't be that much high. So don't just rely on one data source, which is why I was saying, don't look at the data you have. Try to look at what questions do you need to answer, and then create the data to answer those questions. So one way you can create the data is through easy user reviews. The other one is through nini zote. And sometimes also, when it comes to user reviews, there are some inaitwaje, there are some review sites where actually you can see whether this is a verified purchase or not. So for example, if you go on Amazon, you can see, for the people who left a review, was it a verified purchase or was it not a verified purchase? Same thing. So it just depends with what you need to look at and the variables you need to filter to ensure that you get to arrive to the right conclusion. Does that help? Okay. So customer service call logs. So if you have a customer service team, you need to ensure that they are recording everything. Yeah. Not necessarily like in terms of like the audio, but you've given them themes. So if there's a complaint, or if there's positive feedback, what is the positive feedback in relation to? Was it about the service? Was it about the product quality? Was it about price? Was it about availability? And all these other different things. So if you're able to think about those different areas in terms of like the areas where customers are giving feedback, then if there's an issue, so for example, if you take all the complaint tickets and 90% of them are on price, then that tells you what you need to do in terms of like price. So you either need to do a fresh analysis and try to see how you can potentially either increase or bring your prices down. If it's on quality, then you know that the customer service team is not the problem. The problem is the product team. So you go to the product team. The customers are complaining about quality. What can we do in this area? So that's how you also combine data sources from different areas to arrive to a conclusion. Accuracy is usually good, 20%, and also weigh this with some inaitwaje, ile with a pinch of salt, because different customers also behave differently. What you need to understand is the value elements. So always rank what comes first in terms of like what a customer value. Is it price? Is it choice? Is it brand? Is it availability? So if you notice that for your business, maybe the brand comes first before anything else, then that is, it doesn't make sense for you to start focus on things like complaints around price, complaints around all these other areas. If it's quality, then unajua price is a consequence of quality. Yeah. So even if you increase your quality, then you should still be able to charge highly for it. So if a customer is complaining about price, but you know you are the best quality in the market, they won't have a choice. They'll still need to come back to you. So here also pia inahitaji ubongo kidogo, where you're not just doing the things that your customer is telling you to do. Yeah. If you remember Potter's 5 forces, the more power you give to your customers, the more it affects your profitability, because they're able to negotiate better prices for themselves, and they're also able to pit you against the competitor. I know a place where I can get it for this much. I know a place where I can get it for this much. So actually try to understand what is the information that they're not selling you. They're not telling you. So that is why we are saying cultivating product and marketing sense, the psychology that goes into how these people make decisions, so that you can make the right conclusions for your business. Finally, there's another one where it's called selling the future. This is especially for B2B engagements, where, for example, you're selling a software solution, and then they're telling you, yes, this is already serving us so well. Maybe can you integrate maybe another module that does A? So before you actually start investing your time to coming up with that, can you actually tell them, okay, for me to develop that, I could add it to my backlog, but I only see me being able to get to it maybe 2 years from now, ama 1 year from now. However, if you want it to be developed sooner, then maybe you need to put down 70% of the down payment so that we can start prioritizing it. If they're able to do that, then you can see, okay, there's value. Let me start focusing on that. Effective testing, I'm not going to talk about that. Comprehension, before testing commitment, you can actually test if people actually understand what you're about. Yeah. So this is, you actually tell them what you're about, the product or service, or you actually show them like, this is my product. What do you think about it? So if they give you feedback that ticks certain boxes around how you see your product and service, if there's a level of correctness and accuracy based on the feedback they've given you, then it shows you that potentially this this solution won't be as difficult to market, because the customers understand what the solution is about. Yeah. Empathy mapping, I think we won't do it now. We will do it next time. And how we will do it, I might want for us to actually take some bit of time and do one of these things and try to see, okay, if you are measuring needs, pain points, motivations, and whatnot, then how can we actually do it on paper? And we want for us to create a template for that. So next week we will cover that, and then we will cover go to market. Yeah, we'll cover go to market as well. So I think tutaachia hapo leo naona ni overload.
No, it was really informative. Very informative. Very rich.
Haijakuwa mbaya.
I've learned a lot.
Okay,
Advantage.
that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Philip, Paul, Philip na Peter, how's the session been?
It was great. I've learned quite a lot. There are things nilikuwa tu na tu idea, I didn't know where to connect them, but today I think I'm well informed on how they're applicable in the market. Yeah.
Okay. Peter?
It's been so informative. Naona kama class nne hazitatosha.
Hey, this is a subject I'm very passionate about. Like, I had an actual. This one is part of a 3-week class. Kulikuwa na class ingine nilikuwa fanya 3 weeks, and that one tulikuwa tunaingia sana ndani, hata kama biashara, even talking about the skills that are needed to run a business. But ilikuwa inanichokesha, so I decided to shorten it kidogo.
Hii ya leo ilikuwa informative sana.
Awesome. Joy, najua uliingia katikati. I hope you've captured something.
Yes, this was quite an astute, deep level presentation. I hope there's a makeup class for those who are hanging, and I join with Peter. This definitely needs, yeah. But it was actually very insightful. From the point where I joined in, it was very insightful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think what we can do next week, either we do a small practical on this, so that at least, sometimes when lessons are good, but inasemekananga, is it 70% of learning happens on the job. Yeah, when you actually now start doing these things, that's when it's going to stick. So 70% on the job, 20% through coaching and training, 10% through reading and learning on your own. So don't invest a lot of time in terms of like into aje kwenda kusoma vitu. Yes, soma, so reading and nini is good, but for that knowledge to stick, you have to practice it, and you have to do it on your own, because that's when you really retain the knowledge. So all the things that we've been talking about so far, even the templates that I've shared, I would want for you guys to start doing it. So the homework that I'm sharing with you today is when you come back in the next meeting, I want to see everybody who's done a persona exercise kidogo yenye amejaza hiyo sheet, and also competitors, and then for the first 10-15 minutes you guys will walk us through what you've been able to find out so far. Yeah, so that is the homework. What I mean is this document.
Do we have the persona one? I've just seen the competitor.
So
okay. Cool.
So user segmentation iko hapo. I can create something similar, so kidogo ABCs kidogo. Let me share my screen. I'm releasing you guys kidogo tu. So this was the longer one. Hii ilikuwa na vitu mingi sana.
Utashare your
yes.
presentation.
Sasa tutaangalia hiyo maneno. So essentially, you see there's this document. Yeah? And we are talking about age, gender, location, nini, but we've identified some different level of customers. Yeah. So if you find like it's the consumer, yeah, based on what their interests are, needs of zote, we will work and come up with something like this. But sana this one will be more of your own work. So I can give you in the Apatia template, it's editable, where you'll now put those things together. And kwa key considerations, for example, like what we've talked about today, some people value price more than others. So it's always good to have this so that you can ensure that you are giving the right value. You're not improving on things that your customer doesn't like really care about. So that's why I was saying you have to really be careful in terms of like the feedback that the customer is telling you versus also like what goes into their decision making. So it's a very fine line, so lazima ukuwe very careful. Yeah, so I'll share this as well. So hii template ndawekea pale kwa ile, and then I want to see what you've been able to come up with. So first 15 minutes ya kwa hiyo, then we'll breeze through. Potentially next week session might be a bit longer, so either 2.5 hours, potentially we'll try and do it between 2 hours to 2.5 hours. That is okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Aya, sawa sawa, thank you guys, nime appreciate. Usually najua is there are common things that we already know, but I think it's just that now until we do it, it's when the knowledge sticks. So I'm able to talk confidently about them because I don't just focus on the strategy. I'm somebody who's actually been able to get in and do these things myself. So I know you guys will also get to that level. So muendelee kusukuma. So do the homework. Joy, are you in the classroom? Link.
Is there a different? No, I'm only able to join this meeting.
Okay, so I am adding you. I'm sending. Okay, let me send you an invite right now. Because I usually upload everything on that classroom link.
Okay.
Yeah, so on the chat, I've pasted a link.
Okay.
Please click on that link and join the session. So you'll find everything there, yeah? The recordings, na nini zote zote.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Aya, sawa sawa. All right, guys. Once the video finishes rendering, I'll upload it. At least this time we'll go through it. I know it was a lot to cover. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me comments on the classroom wall. So here, feel free to leave any comments here, and then during the course of the week, I can respond. Sawa sawa. So tusingoje tu tufike kwa class.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, cheers. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the weekend. See you next week.